Hey guys, it's Rogway here and it's time for another tutorial, and today we are looking at digital inking in Photoshop. This is a fantastic effect, something that you can do whether you're a digital artist or you're an avid drawer on paper and you want to bring your stuff into the digital world. This technique is used for both amateurs and professionals alike, so stay tuned, it should be exciting. First of all, what we're going to do is we're going to look for an image to start, and if you have your own artwork, you can scan it or photograph it or whatever to get it started. But I'm just going to do a quick search for sketches in Google just for simplicity's sake. And I apologize, I know some of these are, other people's work, obviously, and this is strictly for educational purposes only, just to show you how to do this. So you can see that I can find tons of sketches of almost anything really quick. And if I set my search tools here to large, I know I'm going to get a nice high quality picture as far as the sketches go. Now, it depends on the style that you like. Some people like to have detailed shaded sketches, but other people will look strictly for line art. Again, after you've done a few of these, you can kind of decide what your preference is. I've already got a picture here that I'm going to use, and it's a picture of the Hulk. So I'm going to use that in Photoshop. I'm going to open that up with Photoshop. So here's a picture that I found on Google. I thought it was great for colorizing. Comic book characters, they work really well. Okay, so you can see that when I've got this picture here, it has no color in it whatsoever, but it does have shading, and we are going to put the color and put the life back into this picture. All right, we're going to make it look as professional as possible. So the first step, what you want to do is you've got your background layer here that your image is sitting on. We want to unlock the background. So we're going to double click it. We're going to rename it. We can call it original. I like to name my layers, and I'm going to say okay, and you notice that that little lock disappears. So we can now place layers underneath it, or we can delete the background to make it transparent. We can do a number of things once that becomes unlocked. So what I'm going to do just as a very quick start, and it may not be very perfect, but I'm going to use the magic wand. I got my selections up here set to add to selection, got my tolerance at about 30, and what I'm going to do is I'm just going to click the white background and under his arms as well. Oops, made a mistake, sorry, there we go. And I am going to just try to select that as much as possible. It's not going to be perfect, all right? And I'm just going to try to get all of the background and all of the white area selected. And I'm just going to hit delete, right? Get rid of it right away. All right, you can see that that didn't do the greatest job, but we did get rid of most of it. Now we're going to go on to colorizing. That, by the way, is an optional step. You don't have to get rid of the background. Just for the sake of this tutorial and how I'm going to use it later, I figured I'd get rid of the background right away. Makes my life easier. All right, now I'm going to add a new layer, and I'm going to call it base. All right, and this is the base color that I'm going to be using for the picture here. So I'm going to set it to green, and you know the Hulk is green, obviously. I'm going to set my paintbrush, go to brush, shortcut is B. I'm going to set a nice color for the Hulk. I already got it there. Just a little tip on changing your brush sizes really quickly. The two brackets next to the P key on an American keyboard will allow you to change the brush size really quick and easily. I'm also going to change the hardness to about 80%, and we'll start there. And I'm going to start painting. Now, you'll notice that when I start painting color, it looks really bad. Clearly, I am going over all of the original artwork, which is not what we want. All right, so the way to fix this, there's a number of ways. I could change the blending mode for that layer, but what I'm going to do is I'm going to actually move the base layer below the original layer, just like that. And what I'm going to do on the original layer is I'm going to change the blending mode to multiply. And what that's going to do is it's going to allow the base color to show up with all the lines of the original sketch. All right, so now I can continue on. Whoops, wrong layer. We're going to go back to the base layer. We're going to continue on, and we're going to color in the entire base of the Hulk in green. All right, so you can see that this doesn't take too long, especially with an image this simple. Now the nice thing is, as you're working along and you remember that brackets shortcut that I just showed you, if you get into a tight area, you know, an area where you don't have a lot of space, you can always shrink it down or enlarge it as you work. All right, so I always have my keys, or sorry, my fingers sitting on those keys on the left bracket and right bracket. Now don't be too worried about going into his hair or into his mouth or anything like that. We are going to fix that right away. But we are going to set down this nice base green on all of his skin areas. Now, if we were simply just colorizing a picture and we didn't want to add too much detail, then we could probably get away with just one single color for the entire skin tone. But because we want to make it look good, we want to make it look realistic, we want to make it look dimensional, we're going to just start with this color and we're going to add our shadows and highlights afterwards. Okay, so I'm going to continue to work around the entire picture, setting down this base color. Now I purposely picked this picture because it's a little on the easy side. There's, you know, his entire skin tone is green, which is a huge part of the picture that we can get rid of right away. And so I'm just going to make sure I get all those little spots. Now, if you're wondering, well, why did I go over the fingernails? Those should be a different tone. We're going to fix that all later. And basically just get this set down first. All right, so I'm going to continue to work. I'll be back in a moment with it all finished up. Okay, we're back, and I've got the base tone of the green down, the base color. You can see I missed a few areas. I can fix those up really quickly. Now, I just came across something that you might run into. Let's say perhaps I start working on the hair. So I'm going to pick kind of a purpley color for the hair, maybe a bluish purple, something like that, for the hair tone. And I'm going to start coloring that on the base layer as well. Now I could do this on its own layer just so that nothing screws up here, but for the sake of the tutorial, I'm just going to do it all on the same layer. Now, what happens if I start coloring the hair and I happen to forget a spot on the skin, or maybe I have to touch up an area of the skin that I missed? All right, that can be a problem. So what I'm going to show you is quickly, let's say we lose our color. So right now we are we are painting in this purpley blue color for his hair, but I've now lost my green color I was using for the skin. Now, we could save swatches and keep them for later, but a real easy way is to turn off the original layer and just use the eyedropper, shortcut I, and click the green once again, and you'll notice that it becomes your active foreground color. All right, and then you can get the green back, and you can start painting into the areas that you might have missed. Now, I'm getting it nice and close here, and I'm going to go a little bit carefully around the hair because I want it to look somewhat decent. All right. And you can see that I've missed a few areas, and so I'm just going to fix those up a little bit now, just so it looks a little bit better. You'll see that I've missed some hair areas, so once again I use I, get the blue back, and I start painting, shortcut B to get back to the brush quickly, and I'm just going to fix up those areas that I missed. All right, when you're painting from far away, you know, you don't get it all. You have to get in close to see exactly what's going on here. So I strongly encourage that you zoom right in and check all the little details up close. Okay, so Command 0, back to the full picture. Now we're going to do things like his fingernails and his pants and smaller details. The teeth we'll do in yellow and so on. And I'll come right back in a second to show you how that looks. Okay, so we're back, and you can see now that we have all the color for the base color set. All right, we can see that it's filled in all the areas of detail, but the problem with it is that it looks very, very flat. It doesn't have any highlights or shadows, and that's what's really going to give it some depth and dimension. Now, I have a very simple technique for doing highlights and shadows, and you can look online, find your own way if you don't like this way, but I'm going to show you my method. Now that I have the base layer, I have a good starting point for this picture, and I'm going to duplicate that layer. So I'm going to hold Control, and I'm going to hold, I'm going to go into here, and I'm going to duplicate the layer. And I'm going to just call it, I'll start with this one called Highlights. Okay, so this is our Highlights layer. I'm going to hit OK. All right, so it's sitting on top of the base layer with the original sketch on top. Now, the highlights are the areas of the picture that are going to be brighter. All right, so this layer is only checking for things I'm sorry, I forgot that step. I'm going to set this to lighten. Okay, on this layer, it's only going to look for colors that are lighter than the layer underneath, which means just the highlights. And the way I'm going to do this is I'm going to go to the dodge tool. And the dodge tool is fantastic for this. I have it currently set at 100%, protect tones, and I got it on midtones. And what I can do with this is I can just draw along areas where I think that the light would be brighter. All right, so you can see along the top, if I want to give it a bit of rim light, you know, you can see now that I've got this gradiated, I don't even know if that's a word, graduated effect where the light falls on certain parts of him where it should be brighter. All right, now lighting in itself is a whole entire lesson that you may have to, you know, look up a bit or use reference material, but you can see that with a very soft brush. Okay, I got my hardness right at 0. I can add very realistic highlights to areas where I believe, anyways, that the light would be falling the most. Okay, so things that protrude, these vein type areas, anywhere where that light might be falling on parts of him, you'll see that these are going to become highlighted. Now, the way that dodge works is you may not see a big difference when you first run your mouse over a certain area. You have to kind of draw over it a few times to really see a noticeable result. And I like that about it because it's a very gradual effect. It doesn't do a huge amount at once. You have to go over, you almost have to, you know, feel where that light's going to be and paint it in where you want it. And I like that. All right, so I'm going to go through this whole entire picture, kind of going quick here, but I'm going to go through this entire picture, putting the highlights and shadows where I want it. You can see that that highlights layer, there's the bright areas, and I can really get a nice effect really quickly on this particular picture just by using the dodge tool. Okay, so what I've done here is gone and added a few highlights, and as you can tell, I kind of skipped a little bit just to jump to this part now where I am going to get set up for the shadows. All right, so you can see that we got a little bit of variation in the tone. We got a little bit of highlights in there. It looks decent. It's not that great just yet, but we're going to make it look better in a second. Now we're going to focus on the shadows area. All right, you have to have shadows, midtones, and highlights to really add dimension to your subject. Now, the way we're going to do shadows a little different. We're going to make a new layer, and we're going to create a multiply layer. So we're going to change the blending mode to multiply. And now here's the trick with shadows. If we just go and find a darker color of the green or whatever, it'll work. But I find that the easier way to add shadows is to find about I want to say about a 25% gray. So I'm really sticking just along the edge of the color picker. I mean, I could be specific and put that color in. You can see that my RGB values are actually a true gray. And I'm just going to find not a 50% gray, but a little lighter than that. And we're going to say okay. Now, the reason I went with a gray is because this layer is a multiply layer, meaning that that gray is actually going to turn into whatever color is underneath. Now, I forgot, I got to switch to the brush tool here and get that going. We're also going to set our hardness to 0. Okay, make sure these up here don't change. Opacity 100, flow 100, and we're just going to start painting in a little bit here. You'll notice that it creates a very nice soft shadow. Now, the key thing here is not to go overboard, just to kind of, you know, draw where you think those shadow areas might be. All right, so we're just kind of, you know, nicely following what was already shaded in this original sketch that was created. All right, so I'm just kind of following those sort of dark areas, adding some nice shading and definition to those areas just to give it a little more depth. Now, it depends on you how far you want to go with this. You can add different colors as well. You can shade it with, you know, other colors as well. But basically, you just want to create shadow where there should be shadows. And it is a good practice to change the size of your brush every now and then. You don't want to brush all your shadows and all your highlights with the same size brush. All right, it's going to look really fake. It's going to look really bad. And you got to give it some variation a little bit once in a while. Okay, so we are going to follow those areas. I'm going to jump back in a second with that so you can see how it looks. And then we're going to look at adding a background, kind of finishing this off and making it look really good. So stay tuned in a second. Okay, so you can see now that I've got all the shadowy areas kind of defined. I could have went more, I could have added more, but I think that that's a pretty decent base for the shadows in general. I might find little areas that I want to add a little bit of highlights to after the fact. So like the bottom of his lip here, I notice I missed. And I can tweak that really easily because everything is on its own layer, okay? So we got the shadows, we got the highlights, and we got the base color all on their own layers. And if we turn off the main drawing, it looks really kind of weird, but you can see how that interacts with those blending modes and how it creates the final picture with some depth to it. Now, like I said, I could have went and did a lot more work on this and spent a lot more time making it look good. But this is decent to start with anyways. This is a pretty good dimensional sort of comic inking that we've done here. It looks pretty good, okay? So what I'm going to do with this now, I'm feeling that these colors are a little too intense. And you might find that when you're working in it, you might have to tone back your colors, especially if they're, this is like almost fluorescent green. It's really, really bright. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to save all these layers that I've used to create this colorization, but I'm going to hold Shift, Option, Command E, and if you're on a PC, okay, Control Shift, Alt E, and you'll see that now we have the entire picture on one layer. All right, we still have all the working files below in case we want to make changes, but we basically have the entire colorization now on one layer. And what we're going to be able to do is we're going to be able to pull back the saturation a little bit, at least on this picture. I'm going to just pull it back so it looks a little bit more natural, something like that. All right. Now, kind of a cheat, just to make it look better, because it is comic book style, a lot of times comic books will have this thick kind of outline on their drawing. So an easy way to do that, to replicate that, even though we have one here, we're going to go to that layer, we're going to go down to Effects, and I'm going to add a stroke. All right, and the stroke is going to be set to black. It's going to be set on the center because we want it right along that center line. That doesn't seem to be working too good. We're going to try different things here, but let's go with center to start. And I'm going to just add a few pixels of color to it. Now, you can see that I've missed some stuff along the edge, so that's not working too well. All right, so I'm just going to go 1 pixel, just a little bit of an edge, all right, to give it a bit of a border around our Hulk character. Okay, that's too much. In most cases here, it doesn't look that great that much. So we're going to go less. I'm going to go 1. All right, we might have to clean up our selection around here a little bit. Now, I also want to add a background to this to kind of finish it off. Now, the nice thing about having this all on one layer is I can move it all together. Another way I could have done that is just Shift selected all those layers, moved them at the same time. But it's easier when it's just on one layer. We can move it into position. All right, and I found this background that I thought kind of fit in nicely with the Hulk. It's from the Avengers, actually. So I got this Avengers wallpaper. So there it is. Kind of destruction. Hulk just destroyed the city. I don't know, something like that. We're going to drag this over. I'm going to drop it in here. I'm going to put it down to the bottom under the base layer so that it's at the very bottom. And I'm going to press Command T, or if you're on a PC, that is Control T. Whoops! Command 0. I am going to enlarge that so it fills up the background nicely. Something like that. Okay, hit enter or return and it'll clear up. And there's the effect that we want. All right, we've got the Hulk colorized, looks pretty decent. I'm going to show you a little trick. If you've got little pieces left over from where you cut out the background. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to command click or control click the little thumbnail so it becomes a selection. And I'm actually going to go select, modify, contract the selection by a couple pixels, maybe like 2 or 3. All right, and what that's going to do is it's going to actually make the selection a little smaller. It's going to cut into the drawing a bit. And now if we go select inverse to reverse the selection and hit delete, we are on the Hulk layer and we hit delete, it's going to just remove some of those white pixels that are left behind. All right, now I could go back and adjust the stroke size if I wanted to make it a little bit thicker because now I don't have as many pixels sitting on the outside edge. Okay, but we can just do one for the sake of this tutorial. All right, so that looks pretty good. All right, if we compare that to our original sketch that we started with, okay, unfinished, compared to what we end up with after colorizing, this looks great. All right, so if you want to use your own work, you can scan it in and colorize your own work, or you can find stuff on Google and do something very similar pretty easily. All right, hopefully that helps.